And today we're going to talk about BAML, an expression language to get structured output from your LLM. Now, to be fair, BAML might seem like a very straightforward tool on the surface, but the more I explore it, and what I've realized is that its design and its crazy ass engineering really unlocks some very, very interesting patterns, which I'm personally very excited for. Okay. So today, the goal is not going to be to focus on the tool itself. I mean, of course, we talk about the tool, that's what we're here for. But we really need to try and focus our attention on the patterns that BAML unlocks for us, especially the agentic ones, you know? And who better to learn this from than one of the founders? So, hey, Vaibhav, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
having me today. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I've been
I like the
pestering you a
shirt.
lot on the Discord channel, haven't I?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it pestering. I mean, we respond to almost every message that we get. I think
That's
sometimes we miss a
crazy.
few.
That is crazy. Let's start with the most important question, a question which everybody needs an answer to. Okay? When is the Go client coming out?
Oh my God. I okay, I have a branch locally working that is actually able to call BAML
All
functions
right.
from Go.
That is so cool.
We
All right.
Yeah, so I am able to do that.
But you
Oh
know what?
yes.
This was supposed to be a joke. We can move on to the actual important question. You spoke about beauty, you spoke about fun. And what I realized was, so when I originally started, when I first saw ChatGPT, I was so excited to work with LLMs. Then I actually got to work with it and it was such a frigging disaster. It's so painful. And BAML kind of makes it fun again. But before we get into BAML, I want to ask you, in your opinion, in your experience, what are the challenges of working with LLMs in general? The ones which you solve and the one which you still think are unsolved.
Yeah. I think there's a few different challenges when it comes to working with LLMs. But I think the biggest one is the same challenges that web dev had. Can I like screen share because it might be easier to talk
Sure.
about some stuff? Okay, I'll pull this one up. I gave this as a talk like a while ago, but I think the most interesting part is like to me this is the fundamental problem. If a database or a backend fails 5% of the time, it's horrific, and you should literally stop your software to fix that problem immediately. All hands on deck. And if LLM fails 5% of the time, we somehow have mismanaged expectations around that, and I don't think that's okay. And I think that's really the fundamental problem. It's how do you bridge this gap where the rest of our software makes the claim that 5% is horrible. And now all of a sudden we have this expectation that LLM calls are not horrible. And that I think eventually boils down to just engineering systems and how you engineer a system around 5% failure rates. Because the only time we've ever done this in the past has really been just like fault tolerant systems, which come down from like, how do you build AWS? If you want to build EC2, the only way people will pay you to pay for EC2 is if EC2 is fault tolerant effectively. It always is up. And that's hard. That just requires a bunch of engineers on Amazon side to engineer that out. And that in my world is the problem with LLMs today.
Yeah. Yeah, somehow the expectations has shifted. The goalpost has completely gone crazy, right? I mean, it's weird to see how comfortable and how accommodating we are when it comes to LLMs.
I think that's actually why we're in this world of like why we're stuck in this demo hell, is what I would call it. Where like
Mm,
every app you see is in demo mode, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's almost ready.
yeah.
Oh, give me a little bit more time, we'll get it better."
Yeah. I get
Because
it.
like you can build 5% and you're like, "This is okay for demo," and you're right, it is. But you put it into a real system that has failure conditions and has to plug into the rest of your workflows, and
Yep.
you quickly realize you're not okay with a 5% failure rate for a lot of use cases.
Absolutely. You know what? I want to get into the engineering side and how BAML makes things reliable really soon. But I just have one more abstract question for you, okay?
Yeah.
And this one is something I've even spoken to Prashant a lot. It's hard to understand what's happening here. But the thing is, BAML really tries to put forth the idea of structured responses at the heart of LLMs, right? Like use structured responses to turn the indeterministic side into a little bit of more deterministic things you can
Mhm.
handle. You can do switch cases against and things like that. But the truth is, structured responses have been there for quite some time. At least before I saw BAML. Okay, I don't know the
Yes.
chronology of
Yeah.
what comes first, but structured responses have been there. Having said that, folks who use BAML, like BAMLites, BAMLers, I have no idea what to call these guys.
I'm not sure either. Maybe we can call
But
yes.
we figured that out. But folks who love BAML seem to have one thing in common where they say that, okay, using BAML, using structured responses, using BAML kind of unlocks something, or at least they don't see LLMs the same way they did before. So according to you, what's going on here? Like why this sudden shift in the way, we perceive LLMs or we work with LLMs? Because structured responses has always been there.
Yeah, I will try to describe the answer, and then maybe
Okay.
I'll show you a visual if it doesn't work.
Okay, sounds good. Let's
But
do it.
I think the way I always looked at it, and I always found the phenomena really odd too, because when we started BAML, I wasn't really sure we were exactly headed. I don't know if we saw everything up front, but we definitely noticed that like people would just like be like, I'm thinking about my code differently now.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about LLMs differently once I started writing in BAML syntax. And I think the part of it really boils down to how you think about code when you have engineering around it. So, for example, let's say we have a CI/CD system and plugged into GitHub Action workflows. The way I think about my build system, if it's always green, is very different than the way I think about my build system if I'm just pushing code into it. Because now, because I have this extra engineering workflow added in, which is before a pull request merges, all my unit tests have to pass, I've built an expectation around things. And it's subtle, but it's done for me. And that means for everything on in the future, I make that expectation without putting any context, any brain space into it. And when you're writing an LLM pipeline right now, there's so many things you have to put into context. But the beauty of the abstraction of a function, and that's really the core abstraction of BAML, is I just know that this function will do this thing. And I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about the implementation detail. I don't have to think about the prompt. I don't have to think about really the parsing, nothing. It's just a guarantee of an API contract that I'm making effectively. And I think it's removing that context from my brain that really helps me think of it differently.
Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. And I've also done a little bit of thinking. I think the very experience that you've built around structured responses is now slightly different. Like the fact that we get instant feedback on our things, so we can actually see LLMs in a reliable way, which we could not before. The fact that you can see the raw prompts, the fact that, you can see the
Or even
playground
like
in
write a
action.
test case. Like writing a test case
Exactly.
is really easy. You just like, oh, like this is broken, you write a test case.
Exactly. I think that makes a huge difference. You know what? For guys who are new to this, I think it's our responsibility to just share it. What we're talking about is the BAML playground. So what we're talking about is BAML, if you did not know this, actually, I'm going to keep it simple. We just write functions, and this is a custom language, which we'll come to really soon. We're simply writing functions, and our templates, which are in Ginger, are right in front of us, right? You can pass in any parameters you want. You can return in any parameters you want. And as you can see, these are just structs or classes or interfaces, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that you're treating LLMs and prompts in a way which is very natural to the way you write code in general, very TypeScripty vibe here. And the fact that you can write your test cases, and on top of that, you can just click a goddamn button. The fact that you can actually see how the system prompt and the user prompt comes up and see the response getting extracted right in front of your eye, it just changes things completely. It's absolutely crazy. All right. So yeah.
I think the way I always framed it is like in web development, I think the point at which websites started to become really, really amazing is around the point when React started being more widely adopted. And the reason that happened is like React did a couple of different things, which is specifically what it did is React added a hot reload loop. It added syntax validation around HTML combined with JavaScript. It didn't say that these two are two things that have to live in two different files. It literally put it into the same file.
Yep.
And that simplicity of putting two things together with a compiler that's doing type checking, with a hot reload loop for state management and saying, if this state changes, only re-render this component. In some ways, it functionally decided the same thing where a component is a function. And as long as I know what the function's inputs are, I can expect that the component will do the right thing. And I just reuse my components to build components.
Exactly.
That's really what inspired us in the same way.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good idea because even React or the concept of components on the front end world, it really changed the way front end happens these days, right? We can't think of doing it any other way anymore. Yeah.
I don't, if you were coding back in like 2012, 2013, that wasn't the way.
I know. P guys, we know the pain.
If you worked at Facebook, they use Hack, which is, anyway, that's a whole different story.
Okay, so that makes sense. We'll get back to this React analogy really soon. I have some thoughts on that. But let's get into the engineering part because I know we're focusing a lot on reliability. And it seems like BAML's entire reason of existence is to make LLMs work reliably the way we would make, I don't know, a database work, right? So one of the big things that powers that magic is BAML's ability to extract data. It is insane. I have never seen that before. I mean, you need to tell us about it. Maybe you need to demo us something. I mean, that would be so cool. Do you have something handy?
Yeah, I can demo stuff. I'll pull up VS Code. Let's see if I have something. Can you see my VS Code?
Now we can.
Okay, cool. I've been trying out Windsurf recently. Actually, fun fact, my favorite thing about Windsurf that might convert me over everything else is the fact that like Command T opens up in the middle of the window instead of at the top. Honestly, that's a huge UX unlock. If I'm
Oh my
completely honest,
God.
it does matter because my eyes don't have to look as far. And that's a small thing. But
funny.
okay, let's do some fun stuff with the BAML parser that I think most people haven't seen before.
Yep.
So one of the things that I
You
hate
might want to
about
zoom it up again.
oh yes, let me
That's perfect.
I can go more. Sorry, I use font for ants. I'll show you some fun little hacks that the BAML parser can do that most people probably don't know about,
Sure.
just to show do things. But like in this case, I'm going to have a resume. I'm going to pass in a string or an image, and I'm going to produce a resume data model out. The resume data model is defined as such. Now, in this test case, I'm going to use this one, which is not my email. And specifically, I'm going to ask the LLM to just return things. And so the most obvious thing that the BAML parser can do is handle scenarios like this, where you put some chain of thought and reasoning, so you can make any model a reasoning model. Then even though it's not outputting quotation marks, it still parses the data.
Cool.
So that ends up being, as we found out, pretty useful because it reduces tokens. It also allows the LLM to be more forgiving. But models are getting it better at JSON. Does this really matter? I think that's the first question I started asking myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've probably wondered too, like, what if the model gets better at JSON?
In fact, in some cases, making the LLM change how JSON is might require a little bit more cognitive powers than what it wouldn't,
Maybe.
It's a double-edged sword. Could be.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that JSON ends up struggling in a lot. So one of those examples is like returning quotes. So like if you return like the title, the man said hello, it's really hard to get an LLM to produce this actually, because what ends up happening is the model is just bad at this. But oftentimes the model will produce this.
Yep.
Where it forgets to escape these quotes. BAML's parser can handle that.
Really? Okay.
And yes, so this will just work. You won't have to think about this. I have a bunch of unit tests that I can show you later about all the weird things that we do. But I'll show you some other interesting scenarios that I think are more interesting. So like in the case of generating code, I'm going to run this. Watch what it's able to do. So not only can it output comments in the JSON, which is pretty standard, but now when I'm having the model actually output the code, watch the way that it outputs code. Do you see how it's outputting it in Markdown with a code prefix?
Yeah.
You can imagine how much harder this would be for the model to actually produce an output in if this had to be perfect JSON.
This is actually going to be my follow-up question. Like, how do you go beyond JSON, especially when there are multi-line responses? Like code.
Exactly. So it just did it right here. This is a multi-line response. We pulled it out. We removed the backtick Python. We pulled this out into a code snippet. And there's quotation marks and everything in here. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
Once it's done. I should have used a shorter example.
That's fine. I think we get the point. So help me understand this, Vaibhav. So what I see is you have molded JSON, or you're playing loose and goose with JSON, and you're like, you know what? There are some things better if we just use 3 backticks, the standard code conventions and Markdown inside of JSON and still make it work somehow. That's the idea. Let the model do its thing.
Yeah, maybe the different way to frame that problem is like in gRPC, a lot of systems use protobuf, for example. And the reason that they use protobuf is because protobuf is a lot more compact and better for high data throughput than JSON. It's more optimized for that. So you can choose different serialization formats based on what you want. We've just invented a new serialization format that is really, really good at allowing expressiveness of ideas.
Right.
And it doesn't become concrete until you tell it what the output that you're expecting is. So this data model represents nothing. But the minute you tell me that you are looking for a snippet of code, the minute you tell me that you're looking for a data model that is of this shape, class code response with a field code and explanation, this becomes concrete, and I'm able to return this. If you tell me that you're looking for a string, I'll return this to you as a string. If you tell me that you're looking for a field with just the word code, I will drop the explanation keyword and only give you code. It's a serialization format that requires the type information to be realized into the data model. And then as a part of that, allows for like not requiring quotation marks, allowing for backticks to represent strings and markdown objects simultaneously. It's basically like Schrodinger's cat, where it can live in all states at once until you open the box and look at it.
So this is really interesting. But here's a follow-up question for you, right? And I'm going to keep the screen open just so that people can still see this. So here, what you have done is essentially, actually, can you just drop down the prompt a little bit in your stuff? Because what I've noticed that in your prompt, so you've overridden it. I see what's happening here. Okay, my bad. So what I was going to ask is, when we use context or output format, you usually have a predefined thing which goes like answer this in JSON, something like that, right? So
Yes.
you've just tried to hack that open and say that, okay, answer with my schema. And the question is, how does the model know that it can use triple quotes or markdown within the code block in your description?
Right over here.
Okay.
Right over here. And like, as you can see right over here. And I actually said, put the code triple backticks to prevent escape character. Example, code, blah, blah, blah. And it did exactly this.
That is really interesting. I'm curious to know if this works with smaller parameter models as well.
It does. Want to try it?
Oh, yeah. Can we do that? I would love it. Oh, that was 4 mini, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was for a mini.
That's
So
a pretty small
we'll do
model
another one.
anyways. Okay, interesting.
What model is this one? This is Olama, and I think this is pointing to Llama 3.1. I don't know. Let's try this.
Okay, that's an 8 billion.
Yeah, probably. So in this case, it seems to be struggling a little bit. So let's try and tweak
bit.
this and see if we can get it to work, because I think this should work. So for an 8B model, what I find is that the prompt should go after the model, not before.
I agree.
I'm going to move this around.
It goes in, the user message rather than the system one.
Generate a code snippet. Let's make this request. Cool. Set this. And I don't know if a model is these AP models are going to be good at like chain of thought or reasoning.
Yeah, it may be a bit too tiny, but I think it's.
And you can see it just duplicated my code. So this might be too small of a model. I can try like a 70V, but I can't run that on my machine.
That's all right.
But there are things that we can do here that can help the model be a little bit more like this task of generating like Fibonacci might be a better example. AP models might be a little bit too small to do this complex of a task where it has to generate a code snippet and answers in structured data.
Absolutely. I think the lower benchmark for code should be like 32 billion or something of that sort. 8 billion is.
Yeah, if I were to do an AP model, the way I do this is I'd actually generate 2 prompts where I do this first. And then after it just answers in a string of some kind. And then I'd write a separate prompt that says, given the string, convert it to a structured data. Because AP models are just not going to produce very good results.
No, absolutely. And running 2 prompts for such small models, I think that kind of makes sense as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that expensive, and it's pretty fast as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So help me understand this.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
We just saw one example where we kind of creating our own data language almost.
Yeah.
So this was code, but I want to understand the limits of this. Like BAML can work with triple quotes. We see that now. What other schemas or hacks is possible? What are the limits?
I think the most useful one is actually like, let's take this resume example again. So like in this case, like I might tell the model at description, only work emails, not personal emails, right? So I might say something like that. And I might make it optional in this scenario. So like here, it spit out null, but that's not actually true that this will always do this. Like watch this. If I change this unit test to be Vaibhav-boundary@gmail.com, it might pull it out. The point is I can't actually control if this will happen. I'm really relying on luck for this to be true.
Yep.
I can use a data type that's a little more strict and do this as well. So now it will guarantee that this string will never contain @gmail.com in it, even if the model spits out @gmail.com. Like for example, if I get rid of this description and I put this in here, it gave me null because I've described programmatically that this is impossible without even injected into the prompt.
Okay.
So it allows you to describe like concepts like that, think a little bit more easily, where you can associate like what we call type narrowing with data types of any kind.
Yeah. And I think we already see 2 big aspects here. And I just want to like rewind and just reiterate it. So the first thing we saw was you did chain of thought in a structure response, which again is very unlikely. Because usually the way people implement it is they force the model to give a JSON output, which means it doesn't have space to think. So that's already like a big win because you can achieve a lot more with smaller models now. And that's like one of the first patterns I discovered, and I fell in love with BAML just for that. I think pattern 2, which I'm really digging right now, is the fact that you can describe your own data language almost to the point where you're saying that, okay, you know what? JSON needs to be double quotes and it doesn't support multi-line, but you know what? We're going to hack that. We're going to say, okay, let's just use Markdown and multi-line JSON in there, which is crazy. That is freakishly good. Like in terms of what it unlocks, especially if you want to like do a lot of structured output and get some unstructured data within that structured output. Okay, I see how things are getting reliable now. That is insane. That is so good. And how is this implemented under the hood?
How is it implemented? BAML is open source, so we can all go look at the code.
No, let's not do that.
Implementing a type system is very complex. This feature took about 7 weeks or 8 weeks to build.
Of course.
This other feature, if anyone's looked at this code, like stream.not null, I'll show you what this does, and it's quite subtle. But like I think just being able to have a type system in general is very, very useful. So let's take a look at this experience concept. So you're seeing how this experience fills in by itself.
Yeah.
Over here, I can say that I want each experience to come in only when it's done. So even doing streaming, you'll see that it comes in a little bit more blocky. You see that? You see
Yeah.
how it's a lot more blocky now?
Yeah.
It's about enabling type systems so that all these things are just like things that we implement under the hood as a primitive in the language.
What I'm understanding is your type system isn't just describing schema, but it's actually influencing the implementation of how processing happens downstream.
Exactly.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. See, I was talking about crazy ass engineering. This is what we're talking about. And all of this is in Rust, right?
Yeah, of course. And most of it's done by the team, not by myself. I've done some parts of it, but like the team really has a lot of credit to be imagined here. Like this
Right.
concept stream, like semantic streaming as we call it, was not a concept we planned for, but someone on the team, Greg on the team suggested it, and we played around with it, and it was wild what it unlocked. Just the UI, the way you build a UI is now different because now you're like, oh, I'm streaming, but experiences are only come in as they're done, not in the middle. So I don't have to think about partial state for any of these internal objects, which is just it's just like an unlock from an engineering standpoint.
Yeah, can we see that? Because streaming responses, especially the way BAML does it, is crazy.
Yeah.
I think you guys have a demo of some of the experiences it can unlock, especially with rack stuff. I think I'd seen something somewhere. Do you want to show that? Let me know once you're ready to share a screen.
I'll show the most obvious one first, but like this recipe streamer, and you can see how the loader actually keeps my loader on page. That's like moving with me. Or like I can even like play around with it while it's streaming because once you have structured data, you can build a React component for that structure that actually lets you go do things. And like it just like makes it so much better. It doesn't feel like ChatGPT anymore. That's like the biggest difference I started noticing, which is once you start using structured out and like see these half symbols. These are React components that render this way. This isn't the LLM, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, chat, we need to understand how crazy this is. Like, think about what just happened here. Like, when artifact capability came of Sonnet, we just lost our mind that finally there's some structured way of showing something. This is structured responses by default. And what's actually happening under the hood is that you're somehow getting a stream of JSON objects, or not even JSON object, like typed objects in your language of choice. And you can literally use that. And because these are just objects, you can have your React components. You can create your own visualizations and UIs right off of it.
Yeah.
And this is like a RAG application under the hood, right? It doesn't have to be chat anymore. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be. I think the beauty is it can be chat. It doesn't have to be. It's an option. So like in this case, you're seeing that I'm actually highlighting this. And I'm actually building a deep link into Wikipedia. Right, that takes me exactly to where the sentence was. So like if I go here and I go here, we actually do some fancy matching on there.
That's fine.
Let me show you where it is. I go here and I like search this. This command does not work anymore. Oh, maybe the Wikipedia page updated from when we scraped it. We're not doing a live screen on this. But this is actually matching from the original content. So all the LM response is like part of the text. And then what we do is we programmatically verify that this text matches the text in the actual article. And if it doesn't, we mark this as an error. Let's see if I can induce an error. And then we actually like highlight it as red accordingly.
Right.
I found all of them. Feel free to make one citation. Citations should be summaries, not direct quotes in the data model. Okay, let's see if I can get this to show up. Prompt engineering is very hard, as we're finding. Oh, there we go. Like in this case, see this one? It was it has this said not found. So when we use it as a citation, we actually render this as red for the user in the UI.
Yeah.
And now you can build much more trust with the user with a simple UI change.
Yeah.
That would otherwise be really hard to go build.
You know, I understand this. How does the prompt template for this look like? Like there's a block where, you know, you get the final answer, or is this just one structure?
It's literally just one structure. The structure is this. Answer in text. This is the data model.
Oh my God. You're literally using structured response for streaming text.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. And, you know, I have a question here. So one important thing is that the order in which LLM spits out things is really important.
Yes.
Is there a way we can control the order, at least in the definition of the schema early on?
Right now, the only way to control the order is to like manually move it. We'll probably add reorder capability in BAML because for the same reason that we like your LLM ordering shouldn't be enforced by your code ordering. You should be allowed to have flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah, because especially when you're doing dynamic stuff, it kind of comes towards the end. It's hard to get it
Yeah.
on top. So all your dynamic stuff, which you might want to be on top, comes right in the bottom.
Yeah,
That makes a lot
exactly.
of sense. Yeah, and where can we find all these demos? Because Prashant just asked, or he just mentioned
Um,
that you have a lot of crazy ass demos. So
we
where can we
do have
see
a
some of them?
lot of demos. I think most of the demos are linked over here on the docs page in
Uh-huh.
examples, but they're
Okay.
not pretty well done in live examples. We should probably show. I think one of our members just came back from vacation
Uh-huh.
recently, and I think he took on the mantle of fixing some of these examples and giving us a whole page of all of our demos with GIFs and
Yeah.
hopefully sample code to help
Yeah,
out.
yeah, because it's very hard to visualize power of BAML without seeing something like that. You know what I mean? And this
I
is
agree.
incredible. A lot of people are finding it useful on chat already.
Once I saw the example of like, oh, instead of this as my resume rendered in Markdown, I can go do this,
Yep,
which is like a nice little thing with deep links, with validation on each of these links being correct,
yep.
with like a drop down component. I was like, okay, it's obvious to me that structured data makes a lot of sense. But then I go look at like a graph generator. I'm like, how does someone build a graph like this? Structured data isn't good enough. You need to build something a little bit beyond that. And that's where like we started being like, let's just try and build as many demos of this kind of stuff as possible.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. This is incredible stuff. Oh my God. It's changing the way I look at LLMs as we do this. It's crazy. We had like one question. Prashant asks, is it a fair statement to make that any task can be reframed as a structure response task?
Maybe I'll answer that question in not that exact way, but
Sure.
the best analogy for me is React. You can always use HTML to build a component. Imagine a basic component that is very, very simple. You can build that with HTML. Probably shouldn't. BAML does have a string type. Just return a string if all you want is a string. It's never bad to have clean code. That's the way I look at it because, like, for example, Facebook today uses Hack, which is a variant of PHP, because it was easier for them to change PHP for their needs than to change their backend to not be PHP. That's how hard migrating from bad code is.
Right.
You literally have to go and rebuild the language that you're using rather than migrating to a new language. And I think if your AI pipeline is a critical part of what you're doing, or if you think it will be today, it will be a few months or years from now, you don't want to get stuck with some legacy code that you have to deal with forever.
That does make a lot of sense. And so help me understand this. I'm going back to that streaming stuff because I just realized something. All the parsing magic that we spoke about, that's still applicable while streaming as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, all that streaming stuff is happening because of the parser.
Okay. Wow, that is a lot to process. Okay, that sounds good. That sounds really good. So we're already seeing some crazy stuff BAML can do. And I've heard this somewhere, so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I've heard is that BAML becomes even better if you kind of subscribe to this YouTube channel. Is there evidence to support that?
At least quite a lot.
Okay, Vaibhav just fixes his spot on this channel forever just because of that.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but
if you haven't subscribed, you should.
I'm just
Only
kidding.
because I think you're actually asking like good questions that aren't just like talking about BAML and what's nice. And I appreciate that you like it, but I think you're also asking like questions that are worth like on the engineering side. I think I love the neutral aspect of just looking at it from a code perspective, not a I like this thing, just a very neutral one. I love that.
We're gonna get into some of the things I don't like really soon. But speaking
I'm
of
excited
community
to.
and subscribing, you guys have a Discord channel which you guys are like really active. Like you respond to everything almost immediately. You guys have office hours. It's crazy. It's very hard to come by that level of community support. I know this could be a quick one, but I really want to know what prompted that because not a lot of companies make that.
I
Make that
mean,
effort.
you're deciding to use our shitty programming language. The least we can do is help out, right? That's how we look at it. Like, we're working on making our docs better. We're working on making things like BAML chat help you answer these questions.
Yeah.
But you should have seen BAML when we first started out. There were so many issues. And the first few people that used BAML used it without the playground. They used it without syntax highlighting.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was wondering why they were using it, to be completely honest. So now when someone new comes in, it really does mean a lot to us. I say this genuinely to everyone that considers BAML. It means the world to us when they even consider BAML as an option. So if someone is stuck, we as a team want to do our best to make sure that you're not stuck. Because
Right.
I know how frustrating it is to be stuck on a dependency that you can't control.
Yeah. And talking about the dependency you cannot control. The first time I looked at BAML, I was really put off by this. And a lot of people will be. I think this is going to be a persistent fact, especially when we see more and more backend engineers and people who face the perils of generated languages,
Yeah.
CodeGen in general. BAML is a custom language. Your syntax is your own. It is inspired. It's definitely inspired. You can see traces of TypeScript in there. But it's custom syntax. Why? Why do we do CodeGen?
Why? I think that's a good question. I think first let's talk about the syntax, because
Sure.
why didn't we just use like TypeScript or Python?
Sure.
That's probably the first most obvious question.
Yep.
And I think it ties into CodeGen. But I mean, the first concept is we just looked at two concepts that would have been impossible to express tersely in TypeScript or Python. The idea of at assert or at stream.done, that just can't happen in either of those languages. The type system is not expressive enough for that concept without being like a bunch of generic voodoo magic that like I did C++ meta programming for a long time. And while I love it and that my heart has a soft spot for it, it's not code that most people will ever check in. So like one, the syntax can just enable new ideas. But two, one really, really strong belief we have is that every piece of software in the world will use a model at application time at some point. All we really, really want to support is how does that look like? And there's two options of that world. One is everyone in the world will have a Python microservice that calls an LLM. That is horrific to me. It literally makes me want to throw up. The other part of the world is we're going to write an SDK for every programming language that somehow does this.
Yeah.
That I also don't see working because LangChain tried that and they have a lot of money and they have a lot of users and clearly their code is shit. Or like you look at Idantic. Idantic is not going to go build for TypeScript in the same way that they build for Python. For them, Python will always be class 1, TypeScript will always be tier 2. Structure has the same problem. TypeScript is tier 2, Python is tier 1. Everyone will have to pick something as the golden mantle that they support, and that makes everything bad. The only way you can offer true ergonomics is with CodeGen. In streaming, how do we create a type that is going to autocomplete for streaming without you creating two types in your code? That requires CodeGen.
Absolutely.
And that's really the essence of what we said. It's like we'll build all the core logic because the parser is complex. If we implement it 7 different times, every time we make an update, we have to update it 7 different times.
That's crazy.
And that's just not going to work.
Yep.
So we implemented everything once in Rust and we battle test that sucker like as much as we can. We put unit tests in there. We have a ton of people using it. And then we put a very, very thin interface on top of every language and communicate via core C layers, which don't ever break. And then we CodeGen all the type safety on top of it. And it's really because of this essence of wanting to support every programming language that we had to go down the type safety route. Because
Right.
you go ahead.
No, that makes complete sense. So having the cross-language compatibility, you can customize your experience based on the language, but still have a core engine throughout. That makes a lot of sense. And so getting back to the BAML part, because it's a custom language and it's your syntax. It is your syntax.
Yes.
And that means there's going to be a massive loss of flexibility. And this is where I want to go back to your React analogy. You said we're kind of using some philosophy from React, but React's major focus, in my opinion, again, I'm not a front-end guy. I just love React. React got HTML back to JavaScript to keep control in JavaScript, a language with flexibility and expressiveness, and let to use JavaScript's primitives, a flow controller, of all those crazy things which JavaScript has to offer, to get the HTML out. BAML is slightly different, wherein it's trying to get its own syntax, which makes certain things a little bit difficult. I'll just take one example, right? Like asserts.
Yes.
What asserts mean in a type is slightly different than what asserts mean within a class. Because sometimes it throws an error, sometimes it just removes things.
Well, it actually throws an error in the same place. The only reason that it returned a null is because my type was a non-Gmail email question mark.
Exactly. Those are semantics which
Yes.
are very native to BAML, right?
Yes.
And also what assertions you could do is limited by what you support.
Yes.
So
one,
how do we balance this that, okay, some things need to be in your code because, at the end of the day, you might require some assertions which just cannot be done in BAML. On the other hand, how do you know what assertions could be done in BAML? Like, how do you know that?
That's the thing we think about a lot too. I mean, one, we are a startup, right? So we have to balance time with the balance of what we can do to ship. And you don't want to wait 5 years to have, I think someone said this once, which is show me a perfect programming language and I'll show you one that no one uses. But the balance that we choose is, so one of the things that we used is we use Jinja as a lot of our templating stuff and for our assertions. And we did that because Armin, who works at Sentry now, I think, he actually wrote a version of Jinja called Mini Jinja in Rust. So it allowed us to skip a lot of the Jinja stuff. Now, the problem with Jinja is that there's no static analysis. So we actually wrote a static analyzer for Jinja just to make it not suck as much. But that said, Jinja is horrific compared to like regular code. Like you write pipes, you write vertical bars for length. You do like objects vertical bar length to actually call the length filter on it is what Jinja calls it instead of a function. We hate that.
Yep.
I hate that. At least we're working on an expression language that allow you to write arbitrary code that looks almost like TypeScript in BAML.
Interesting. Okay.
And the goal is to really be inspired by TypeScript, but then do small things that I think TypeScript got wrong.
Right.
That makes your life from a reliability standpoint better. Like I think const versus const is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite features in Rust is the fact that everything is immutable by default. So you catch bugs really easily when you're in a for loop changing a variable, and because you marked it as mute, but you shouldn't. You're not even allowed to do that. But let's say you mark the variable as I'm allowed to change it, and you change it, but then you don't read from that value ever again.
Yeah.
It can give you an error that says you're changing a value without reading it.
Yep.
It's just like conceptually so easy to catch errors when you do small things like that.
Yep.
But the TypeScript syntax is objectively better than Rust because from a developer standpoint, it's easy to read. And it has beautiful things like anonymous types.
Right. Absolutely. I think this is a perfect segue to get into agents, which we should have done at least half an hour ago. I'm so sorry, chat. But okay, let's come to agents because I know you've got some plans for agents as well. But before we dive into the BAML way of doing agents, I want to understand from you, what's the scope of an agent? Like what is an agent beyond what BAML already does, you know?
Can I screen share?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I'll show you something of what I think an agent is because I think this will talk about it a lot better. I wrote this a while ago. Let's go down to like what is an agent. And I think before I can talk about what is an agent, we have to know what is an LLM. And to me, an LLM is a thing that can take data and then convert it to data.
Up just a little bit?
Yes. When I look at an LLM call to me is just a function. It takes in data in and spits out data out. And I just think of it as that. I don't think of it. It's like in a computer, you have a unit that can add two numbers together. An LLM is, to me, a similar thing. It is a unit that can take in a data blob and spit out a data blob. I just assume that's going to be the data shape that I want, and I ignore all failure cases just to simplify my reasoning. So then when I look at tool calling is returning a union of data blobs, right? So I have a tool, I can return one of these three tools. That's really a function that returns one of three types. Then I look at multiple tool calling, and now this becomes a function. Instead of taking in inputs and returning one type, it's a function that turns in an array of types. Now I can call multiple tools.
Right.
And then the call pattern it's just a for loop around this array. But when I look at an agent, to me, an agent is literally just a while loop with some state. That's all it is. And it doesn't even have to use an LLM. It just, the part that makes it sound agentic is the fact that the thing doing the computation is not code that I hard code. It's a model making that decision. But in the end, it's a function that takes in state and returns in some of these data types. And then I toss in a while loop around it. And I say, while I have an action, I will do some state. I will update my state based on certain actions, and I'll rerun the loop again. And then if I get a different state, I'll update my state based on the action and I'll return. And at some point, some of my states are terminal, and I will literally just return and exit out of my entire agent with those terminal states. And to me, this is all an agent is.
Absolutely. I think I agree with that. Like last week, we had a stream on something I call the agent anatomy, and had essentially an agent is just a reasoning loop. But the agent is responsible for a couple of key activities if we try to list them down. Like one of them could be around data prep. For example, if you want to do some kind of a RAG example, you want to get the context from a database. Really straightforward. But data prep can be really complicated as well. Like if you want to generate a SQL query or a Cypher query for a graph database, your LLM might not get it right in the first try. You might get an error message back from the database, which you need to use to go back to the model and go like, hey, you know what, model, you just screwed up there. So you're prepping up data, which is in the form of a conversation history with the LLM. And BAML doesn't make this easier to do because in your BAML prompt, you would have to go ahead and make sure that those for loops are in place. You'll have to make sure that, your initial prompt is in place, your for loops is in place. I think I have an example of that as well. I think you have one. I think you're itching to show one right now.
So the way I've always thought about that is actually easier to do that in the native language of your choice for a couple of reasons.
Fair enough.
So I'll show you one thing. This is a fairly complicated piece of code, so I'm gonna simplify this quite a lot just to show what I mean.
Okay, sure.
So in a very, very basic scenario, let's say I have a function that can chat with a graph, and my chat with a graph capability is going to return either a response where it's the answer to the question or a query that it wants to make into a graph database of some kind. And it's going to return a Cypher query. Okay. Now, what ends up happening in many times is that it does get the Cypher query wrong. And the way that we handle that is the way you even build your state for that loop is very, very, very hard. So for example, I'm gonna remove all these. So this is over here. All right, copy and paste some code. So in the case of the agent responding with a graph query, what I end up doing is I say, okay, run the query. If I get an error, I add some message to this extra buffer that I keep around.
Precisely.
And I add it into this message of what the error was. And then I continue my while loop and I go on. And I pass in all messages, including all the conversations I have and all error messages I have up until now.
Right.
But the minute I get a correct answer, I actually clear my extra messages buffer. Then I go ahead and only add the correct message into my actual state. So I pretend as if the model got the response right on the first time around.
Right.
And that concept of being able to manipulate my state that precisely, of only putting in what I want, is really, really important. Because you can imagine that this thing is trying to do a very, very hard query, for example. And in that scenario, I might want to do something like this. If I have more than 4 error messages, let me add a special command that says, this is really, really hard. Try thinking what could be wrong first, then answer. And literally inject in chain of thought into my prompt. And then if it got wrong 10 times and it's not able to build a query, I can literally hard code a response to the user that says something like this. And this level of control is very hard to do. If a framework isn't written in pure code, and it's not about just a prompt, because I'm clearly changing my message history over time as well by clearing my error messages out.
Yep.
And I think that's the nuance of why we've kind of held back on supporting agents more directly in BAML. I want to see more patterns like this emerge.
Right. I totally agree with this. So a lot of the mechanics of an agent, of that loop which you spoke about, is very sensitive to the business logic. It's hard to like make it out of in a framework. In fact, even we were trying to attempt to make an agentic framework on top of BAML ourselves. And what we realized that the most common way of using it would be exposing the implementation loop to the user. Because it's hard to encapsulate all the complexities or all the nuances inside like of a framework, you know? So what does this mean for BAML's future?
There's a couple things. Just because this stuff can't be expanded doesn't mean there's not value in writing this stuff in BAML. So I want to show you an example.
Okay.
What if you could write something like this? Function, just because this stuff, it's best expressed in code, doesn't mean that it can't benefit from being in BAML.
Okay.
So the first benefit you get in BAML, like we've talked about a few times, is this ability to just like have this playground.
Agreed.
Let me make this optional. I can actually run this. What if you can have a playground that can actually run for like an agentic loop by default without having to do any work?
Yeah.
So that's probably one thing that we're really, really keen on and excited about. But then some certain new paradigms become unlocked. If you want to say something like this, function chat with graph, user message string, and you want to go return like this, string, and then you want to say like while true. I guess I'll write more like TypeScript.
That's fine. Yeah.
While true, do this. And then you want to be able to write really tersely something that goes like this, response.query. Because we're streaming, we can actually get this data. We can actually run this query as soon as the query thing becomes available.
Right.
We don't even have to wait.
It's not waiting for the entire response to come back.
Exactly.
It's operating as the response is being streamed back. That's great.
Exactly. We can do that because we own the compiler, and we can build a call graph that literally says that the only dependency on one query is based on response.query.
Right.
Which lives on here, and then we can just like write that code. It's like a speed up to a level that you can't do currently.
Yeah.
Oh, the compiler can do this. We can't, but the compiler can. And this is why like we think there is a huge future.
That's
writing code purely in BAML.
Oh my God, that is absolutely nuts, because if I'm understanding this right, the major problem with agentic workflow is the moment you want to get into multiple calls, you have to wait for the first call.
Exactly.
And only then can you process it, right? But here, the compiler is going to be smart. And because you have that crazy ass extractor, you can be like, oh, I got the query and the query is complete. You know what? At this point, screw everything else. Let's just move on.
Exactly.
That is so cool.
Exactly.
That is so
You nailed it. And like this is why like our expression language is taking a while, because we're finding cases like this.
Right.
that are truly special to what BAML lets you go do.
Yeah. And this wouldn't have been possible without CodeGen. I mean, it would be really hard. Like you could do it with Rust macros,
Well,
but nobody wants to run Rust macros now.
exactly. And then also like this part over here, the beauty is your Python code will literally just call b.chat with graph and you'll
Yeah.
just get a string out. You won't even have to think about it.
So I have a question here. A lot of the business logic or the validation aspect. So we're talking about data prep here, right? We're trying to prepare
Yeah.
the conversation history and things like that in BAML code. And that seems fine because we're just doing simple array manipulation and things like that, like appending to an array, clearing an
Yeah.
array and things like that. That's still straightforward, nothing that fancy. However, in some cases, things can get complicated, especially on the validation side. Like you might want to run a
Yes.
database call, or maybe you want to pull something from the database for prepping up that data. How do we account for that?
Probably have an
Yeah.
RPC solution that allows you to register tools in other languages directly
right.
into BAML.
All
But
right.
also like there's nothing that prevents like in the end, all you're doing in Python is just making a network request via socket. As long as BAML has a socket primitive, you will be able to do all that stuff as well.
So you're saying BAML would run like a separate process and inter-process communication, something like that?
There's different ways that we can go about it. We typically try and avoid a separate process whenever possible.
Fair enough.
We want to be in the same process as much as possible just because it makes debugging so hard when you're
Yeah.
across process boundaries.
Yeah. Maybe WebAssembly can help a lot here.
Yeah, so I mean, BAML is built like it compiles to WebAssembly, compiles to x86. The playground is built in WebAssembly, by the way. That's why it works.
Right.
So yes, but I think it's not just about that. It's like I think what we think about is like what does it take to make a network request in BAML? Like what if you could do like request.get? That's one element that we think about. Also, like what if you could define a thing that's like a remote tool that just does things
Yeah.
in BAML? And then you can register it from Python.
Yeah, like in WebAssembly, I know a lot of WebAssembly toolchains like Xtism, they support calling the host functions directly from the WebAssembly client. So if Rust was within WebAssembly, you could just pass in a Python function. Of course, there are some constraints around that.
Exactly.
But that would kind of allow BAML to talk to your host function.
That's kind of what we're thinking. It's like maybe not necessarily through WebAssembly, but through some callback mechanism where you can like pass in callbacks on what you want to happen when, and then like just register callbacks.
So I had a feeling you would say something like that. And I have a concern here. So the beauty of BAML's playground is the instant feedback. Like you can see it right there.
Oh, don't worry. The solution will include support for the playground.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my. So you're saying that my BAML playground will invoke my code, my actual code in Python. Actually, let's not use Python. In TypeScript or Go.
Or whatever you want.
Or whatever you want, of course, as long as it's not Python, guys. And the playground will just have the capability of calling it as if it's like a tool call. Almost like that, right?
The goal will be to do that. The goal, if the playground, I think if the playground doesn't support it, we view that as a showstopper in many scenarios.
Okay.
So
that's a good restriction.
Like in general, we have taken the stance that the playground is essential to success. So all designs that we have incorporate like one of the things that makes BAML unique as a language is that it's designed to be visualized.
Right.
Absolutely. And like every design decision is like, we ask ourselves like two questions every single time we release a feature. One, how can we take advantage of, how will the playground take advantage of this? Two, how does that feature take advantage of the type system that we have? And if both those questions can't be answered well, we generally don't do the feature.
I think that ties back into the magic we spoke about earlier, right? The entire magic. The playground is a big part of it. But I have a follow-up question on this one. So when I was trying to do this myself, of course, it wouldn't be as concrete as what you can do because you are BAML. However, the fact that I have to bounce between my custom code and the BAML, and because the syntax and language is different, it requires a certain bit of a mind shift, right? Which does put cognitive pressure on your head, not just as a developer, but also as an AI code assistant. Do you plan on dealing with it, or it's just something you have to live
that's really why BAML is going to have a full expression language. So you can do as much as possible purely in BAML.
Oh my God. That's a big statement right there.
Well, that's how we're going to do the query thing that I was showing you, which is like we're going to build an expression language whose call graph understands semantic ordering and like dependency graphs.
That's crazy.
So yes, the goal is to be able to let you do anything, express any piece of code in BAML. Right. And like any other language, it will have its cons. Certain code might be harder to express. Certain code will be easier to express. Like Python is great for data science. Script is not as good for data science.
Right.
But really, we want to think about like how people are going to build libraries in BAML that other people can use. And that's the next real evolution for us when we think about like an expression language is how does a library system play into this?
Yeah. So if I understand this right, what you're saying is the expressiveness of defining the loop, the way you define the loop, that would sit within BAML, including the business logic behind it. It's just that your adapters would be in your custom
Yeah,
code. Is that a
exactly.
fair statement? Okay.
Yeah.
I think
Like,
I
or
get what you're
yeah, I think the way I would describe it is like, I want you as a developer to be able to choose exactly how much stays in BAML and how much stays in your code. If you as a team are have very little AI pipelines and you want to write the whole agentic loop in Python or TypeScript or Go, we want to support that. But if you have a team are doing 90% AI stuff and it's all dynamic types and it's all these weird things that you have to do, or you're very latency sensitive and you don't want to build that streaming route system yourself, then put it to BAML and we'll make that part easier.
Yeah, I think we have a question in chat which I kind of resonate with because I hear you coming from the Rust philosophy. Like, if you want to do this, you can do this. You want to create
Yes.
your own DSL in the type system, sure, you can do it. But there's a whole slew of people, especially gophers like me, who are like, why do you want two ways of doing the same thing? Like, and we have a question in chat. What do you think is the right balance of business logic in Python versus business logic in BAML? How do people even draw that line of what goes in
Yeah,
BAML versus
I
what
think
goes
we're
in
all going to
Python?
discover that as we go on.
All right,
But the point is, it should be a spectrum that you can choose.
fair enough.
If we don't allow you to express certain things, we force you to use Python, then you're stuck.
Right.
And that sucks because you may not want to make that decision. You may want to pull it. And like, honestly, the only reason the expression language is only coming up in our minds as well is because when we first started, we wanted to keep BAML less and less because it's scary. Like, I don't want my config file to have, but actually, like, more and more people are asking, like, can I just pull some of this logic into BAML to simplify my code?
Right.
So it's really just coming from a demand of what we see is like people want to have the spectrum of choice. And if
Got it.
I can also imagine myself as a very senior developer initially being like, oh, I don't want to add a dependency. I want to do sure, I believe this thing might be good, but I want to do as little as possible in here on day zero and do only the most essential parts and do everything in what the thing I really trust. And maybe if I develop trust in it over time, I'll do more. Just like cloud systems, if you remember. When cloud systems first happened, so many people were like, let's do like the least important workload in the cloud. And we'll do everything else on our own servers.
Yep.
And then eventually you just move everything to the cloud because it turns out
Yeah.
yeah. And it's more, the cloud wouldn't have succeeded if they didn't give you a choice. If you had to move everything to the cloud or nothing, it would be bad. So that's kind of how we view that design. It's not about doing two ways or one way.
I see.
Like, software is opinionated. It is a form of art, like I mentioned earlier.
Yep. Yep.
And removing your ability as a developer to have that choice is bad. Well, that said, I do believe in opinionated style guides. You should expect a style guide about BAML to emerge as we build out a formatter that will probably tell you how we think about code.
Yeah. And I think the cautious approach the BAML team takes, I kind of really appreciate it because you kind of like to test the waters and see how people react before taking a stance, you know, like a very cautious and conservative approach to things. I think I appreciate it, especially for a tool which is really going to be the core engine driving a lot of the AI applications. It's like a database. You don't want to mess with a database, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to ship something and you're like, oh my, are these people changing everything every week? Are they going to, like, OpenAI release like Assistance API? Then they release a couple other APIs, and clearly, like, it doesn't work. It was a failure. Then the GPT store. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No one on the team wants to do that. It's because it's, one, a lot of work for us to ship new capabilities in the language. But two, like, a language is beautiful because of its simplicity. The key part that will make BAML successful is the libraries you can build on BAML, not BAML itself. BAML should be almost bare. The libraries should be the thing that have the power.
Right. So let's take to the next level of agents, right? Eventually we get to a point where agents need to be orchestrated together to do something useful. And I mean, orchestration has always been there. Personally, if you ask me, I don't understand the hype behind LangGraph, Pydantic graph. I mean, it's always been there. We've been using temporal for ages now. But the point is, it is going to be a very important thing in the AI community for sure. And maybe temporal is not for everyone. So is BAML, or are you guys thinking about the orchestration side of things, or is it too soon?
Here's the way I'd put it. One, like, once we have the expression language, you'll be able to orchestrate systems very easily in BAML. But really, there's no better orchestration loop than an if statement. I still don't understand the whole concept of I have a router and I call these three nodes written in graph form in my code. Like, that code makes my head hurt. I can't command click. I can't jump to references. and it's all strings too. So it's
Yeah.
like even harder to follow. It's like that code just doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's an early optimization of people trying to write complex systems
Yeah.
in a world where, like, if you remember in interview prep, I think the hardest problems for most people are graph problems, not tree problems, graph problems. And that means that we probably shouldn't make graphs a very common data structure for expressing code. Because even though your AST or your syntax is a graph of some kind, most people don't think of it that way. Like your
Yeah.
Python AST is a graph. It's called a tree, but it's really a graph because of recursive functions and all the
Yeah.
stuff that you want a language to do.
Yep.
So like I look at all these systems, I think it's an early optimization that everyone is making because of something that LangGraph did, and everyone is copying them.
Yeah.
But I think it's similar to class components in React, where clearly they were wrong. Function components are the answer. Building a class component was wrong. Class components are inspired by video games, update state loops. And the function component is just better, objectively, from all standpoints of code. It not only is less syntax, just less concepts to think about. That means less bugs. That's my view on graphs.
I think I agree with you on that, on a personal level, that graph-based orchestration, I mean, sure, it might simplify the way you write things, maybe, but you can always just do things with a for loop or an if statement, right? But the point of orchestration goes a little bit more than that. See, the way I think of things is LLM are expensive operations. And if things fail or if you get errors, you want to be able to continue, right? So a workflow orchestration is like a state machine at the end of the day. I want some kind of a state machine to be able to suspend to get some human input or to get an API input and then resume from where I left off, rather than have something stuck waiting for something to
I'll
happen.
give you a sneak peek. So that's a great question. Yes, okay. So you know how async await was a new keyword that we introduced into many programming languages, and it changed the paradigm of how we do async IO, because now you don't have to do multi-threading. The language does multi-threading for you, and like coroutines and all the other stuff.
Yep.
And like you don't have to worry about it. The future just resolves, and then you just tell it when you want to resolve and when you're ready to use it, and background threads happen off of some worker thread. What if there was a way that wasn't just about yielding control, but what if you could suspend and resume?
Yeah.
From disk. And what if that was a keyword that existed in the language?
Whoa. Whoa.
Right?
Oh, so wait, am I okay? Go on.
The idea is that you should be able to do that. You should be able to write code that writes something like, do this. If this, suspend. When this thing resumes, it'll respond with this data model and then resume. And this can come in handy in quite a few places.
Yeah.
For example, a human in the loop workflow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Retry logic, callbacks to say when this thing fails, trigger this other system and resume when that system responds back with some way.
Right.
And how do you write that code? That I think needs to be as simple as code. And when you do suspend resume, new problems come into the picture, such as like, what happens when you suspend for 2 years and you resume 2 years later and your data model has changed because your code has changed?
Yep, absolutely.
That's why the type system in BAML is being designed so carefully. It's designed to be a version control data schema.
Okay, hold on. Let me put this in perspective. So I think you're getting very close to what temporal does, but with a different syntax and a different objective in mind. I'm not sure if you're aware of temporal. Are you?
Temporal, I think, is more of an accompaniment rather than. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, of course. The architecture is going to be different. Of course. You compile down instead of having like a separate service.
No, that's not what I mean. I think you'll be able to use temporal with this workflow, not only use one or the other.
Really? So help me visualize this. So let's say that I have a long running workflow, and let's keep it simple that we start with an LLM prompt, we wait for like the human to validate it, and then we go ahead and finally do something, right? So planning, wait for human input, execute, something very simple. Now we need to suspend because we never know when the human will come ahead and give me the green check, right? It's like a pull request. Exactly. It could be anytime, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, your workflow could change. Anything could happen, potentially speaking. Let's not get into the workflow changing because that's like a very complicated area.
We can talk about that later.
Later. Sure. Yes. So in terms of the semantics of the code itself, your BAML function is relinquishing control back to my business logic or my client code, right? What exactly is happening here?
Like, let's maybe I'll screen share and I'll write some pseudocode. And this isn't a promise of like this is coming tomorrow or anytime like immediately. This is just like things that we think about how code has to be written.
All right.
Here's how I look at this. Human with human in loop, right? There's some data object that I have that is a string.
Sure.
And then somehow what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to ask an LLM response is equal to like ask LLM something about the data.
Sure.
Then what I want to do is something like this. Suspend.
Okay, I'm with you.
And then it's going to return some sort of like validation.
So suspension returns a data object by itself, asynchronously, of course.
It's not even asynchronous. It's more like a total shutdown,
Fair enough.
right?
Okay.
Because you could like turn off the machine and resume.
Okay.
That is the
Okay.
goal, right?
All right.
And then
I'm
like,
with you here.
like you could do this,
Got it. Sounds good.
right?
I'm with you here.
You get the point. Like,
I get it. I think we get it. So the idea is you have a BAML function which does stuff, but you have like a keyword which says that, okay, we need to suspend things here. So some state has to be persisted somewhere. And the fact is that it's re-entrant. So it can recover and start from the suspended form rather than starting from the
exactly.
start.
And then in your Python code, you run something like this. So I'll put this on the side. And like this is like one possible idea.
Of
Again,
course.
not committing to anything. So you're going to call this b.this data.
Can you keep the Python code on the left side if possible?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
I'll move it on here. So you can do this, right? So you can pass in data, or you can do like
Some state object.
on suspend. You don't even need on suspend. So yeah, you can do this. Data equals this.
Okay.
B dot agent dot.
Sure.
You can do something like this, right? And then you can do like data dot on suspend, or like let's just write a simple way. Try result equals data dot run except suspend.
Okay.
And you can do different whatever you want to do here. Say this is the database, whatever you want over here.
The
right?
data is the state of execution?
The data is whatever this data model is.
How do we resume it back?
So then you could do like b dot agent dot resume.
Ah.
Exactly.
But how does it know which invocation to resume? There could be multiple goals.
So you're going to give it a state object. That
So there has to be some
basically
state
spit out.
object
Yeah.
passed
So this
around.
S
Got
object that you give is something that you serialize and you just pass back in.
Got it. I
it'll
think I
basically
understand this.
Exactly. But the point is like this thing is something you could implement today. You could implement this today.
course.
It's just a lot of code. But I think this paradigm is going to be something that's more common.
Got it.
And it would be useful to be able to do this with one keyword rather than 50.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the heavy lifting of just creating that state object and to be able to resume once you're given the state object, even if BAML takes control of that, that's a big win. That's already such a big
And
win.
I think that's like where I find this balance of like, what do you want an agent framework to do? I probably don't want an agent framework to control the while loop. I probably do want an agent framework to be able to suspend resume.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting concept because resuming is really hard in this state because how do you resume from this line with all the other variables being the correct state?
Precisely.
Because that is the hard part.
Absolutely. I mean, the entire concept of re-entrant functions, you have to design it as a state machine under the hood, right? Every state has to be frigging recorded. Oh, it's so annoying.
And it's really hard to do that correctly.
Right.
And it's just a bajillion lines of code. And the point is our BAML's runtime can do that.
Right. Absolutely.
So BAML's runtime doesn't have to be fast, just like Python doesn't have to be fast. It just has to do some things that are really, really annoying perfectly for you. And like re-entrant, I think, is one of those concepts.
So compared to something like Temporo, actually, this is a stark difference from graphs because this is like a much cleaner way because it's so easy to resume and continue. But in LangGraph and Pydantic Graph, it's just a pain to suspend and resume. It's just hard. So over here, because it's your language and you can break it down into your AST, you know precisely what states to capture in and what are the checkpoints at which you do that. So the magic is taken care by the BAML compiler, I should say.
Yes.
And me as a caller just gets a clean abstraction. Okay, I run something, I get a state back.
And the CodeGen basically can do this for you. And like we can do different things. Like we could try to name this state if we want.
Of course.
Yeah, so you can actually like know exactly when you suspended, with what context you suspended in, whatever you want into it.
Of course. This is amazing. The fact that you can take your state. So yeah, I see what you're saying. I could use this alongside of temporal. Nothing is stopping.
So it's not. I don't really view this as like because you could temporal do this and then redirect to call this in this scenario. Blah blah blah.
Exactly.
It's not really the same. It's a different thing in my opinion.
It's a different thing. Yeah, it's different. You're very focused on from an agent's perspective rather than a complete workflow. So you would have a larger workflow with a suspending agent maybe in the middle.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think I hear you. All right. So
but I think this is when I think about agents, like these are the kinds of paradigms that I want to spend more of my time thinking about. I don't really want to care about the graph loop. Like, sure, if someone wants to write a graph, they can write a graph system around how they call systems. I'm not going to fight them on that.
I appreciate that. Because you're allowing people to build the graph layer on top if they really, really wanted to do it.
And like use LangGraph, use Pydantic Graph. I don't care. Use that with BAML. It works.
Yeah. I see. BAML seems to have a very platform-centric approach that you want to be a platform on which other frameworks are built or other opinions
Yeah,
are created.
you want to have some opinions, but only the course of opinions that do
Makes
matter.
sense. That sounds good. All right. This is actually really interesting. Do we have a roadmap for some of these things, like the agentic pattern, the orchestration? Like, do we have some
We have
timelines?
people working on this
Okay.
stuff under the hood and starting to play around. This is why I can share these ideas, because like
Okay.
they're not coming out of nowhere. They're like somewhat thought through, and like some ideas are starting to be realized about like like the dependency on streaming to be like, I can call streaming and suddenly just trigger a second workflow faster by not waiting for the whole thing. These are patterns that we're emerging as we're exploring these concepts. But I don't have a strict timeline for the expression language. Like you said, we are a little bit slower to ship certain things.
Right.
And the reason for that is like we want to be really careful in the establishing a pattern before doing it.
Absolutely. That makes
And
complete
we
sense.
do kind of hold the bar kind of high on our team for like what is allowed to ship. If it doesn't, we've worked on a feature for about 3 months before and thrown it away.
Oh,
To give you an idea, yeah. But that was the right call, and now we're going to release a version of that feature that is much better. But
Okay.
that exploration allowed us to understand that was the wrong call and how to rethink it. So in general, like BAML is designed to be a longer term mission.
Yeah.
And that's where like people like you sharing your opinions, or anyone else that shares their opinion about like, this is what I hate, this is what I love, lets us amplify and double down on that. Because people can ask us for things and we love taking advantage of that. But some things like the playground or even the BAML syntax, semantic streaming, like the at stream.done concept that I showed earlier today, those are things people would never ask for. This suspend word is stuff no one will ask for.
Yep.
So we have to find the balance of what are things no one will ask for and how do we go do them with the things that people are asking for and go do that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's like saying, right? If in early 1900s something.
The fourth.
Yeah, you ask for a goddamn fast. If you ask them what do they want for transportation, they would ask for a faster horse.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're calling us people who just want horses while you're working on like, the next Ferrari.
I'm saying.
I see what you're saying.
Not everyone
I'm
wants
kidding,
to dream
I'm
of
kidding.
cars all day long. They don't. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah. No, I
You need a
absolutely
lot
get
of
it.
empty brain cycles where you're doing nothing, sitting on a chair,
get
just
it.
like thinking of syntax.
I get it. And I think we're seeing some acknowledgements from the chat here as well. So what about evaluation though? I know BAML has some basic mechanics around testing. It's fairly trivial. You cannot really start pushing it to proper agent evaluation yet. But do you see BAML investing more time in the testing territory, especially on the evaluation side?
Yes, I will show some stuff that I think is not live yet, and it will not be live for a little bit, maybe like another 2 weeks. But it is very close to working, and I can show some stuff.
Oh, you want to show something?
I'll screen share. Yeah.
Okay, we're getting the deets, guys. We're getting the deets.
Okay. So we've all seen a BAML function, right? A BAML function takes in data types and it returns data models back. What we can do from this code is build this out for you, where we can take all your code over
a tiny bit.
Let's see if this works. Copy image.
I think this is good enough. It should be good enough.
Let's go here. It'll be easier for me to do in the browser. What we're able to do is take your BAML code and actually upload it, and then understand how your data models change over time. So in this case, I can see that even though it's the same function, your data model actually split between company being a string to being an object with company name and location.
Okay.
And we can help you get all this data for all your agent pipelines, for any step in your agent pipeline with a call graph and everything attached to it, like a drill down V. And then more importantly, be able to label it very quickly to build evals. So you can say, oh, this phone number is wrong, this phone number is wrong, this phone number is right. And you can see that I can see my inputs versus my outputs very clearly. And I think this is how you really want to do evals, where your evals are attached to your data models. And the minute your data models change or your function changes in some way, you can get a split that easily lets you understand that.
Across your test cases.
Not just test cases, across your production pipeline too. I have an AI pipeline that's running these 7 functions. And some of them are BAML functions, some of them are regular Python functions, some of them are Go functions. It doesn't matter. I can track my data models across all of them and just see exactly what's happening. And that's where we find that there's a high amount of value in just being able to clean out your data. So I can quickly see like these emails are wrong and just say like bad, and just like label them as such.
Okay. So this is getting into the territory of observing how your models are, or how your prompts rather are performing as your schema evolves, right?
And your agent pipelines. Because remember, an agent is just a function that happens to have a while loop and state in it, but at the very top, it is a function that returns data models.
Yep. Okay.
So we give you that as well.
That sounds really interesting.
Then you can take all the data and turn that into test suite.
But does BAML help us write those test suites? Because a big problem with
Oh,
LLMs is that you don't know the use cases up front, right? You discover them as
yeah. So
folks
I
use
guess I
it.
haven't shown this in this UI, but you can. There's a checkbox here in the screenshot where you can actually just checkbox and then like download as a test case and already convert it to BAML code.
Whoa. So BAML will help me write those test cases from my
I think
production
we do that.
examples.
I think we actually do that already today
Really? Ooh.
in the current observability offering we have, which is like I think it should, in theory, unless I did something wrong. But if you just like go here and like you go to any tests, and this is like the old version of the system that doesn't even have like the full understanding. But if something doesn't look right, you just download it, make it a test case, copy and paste right into BAML.
Ooh.
That's it. You're
Okay.
done.
All right.
Yeah.
Th-
So that's part of the goal of what we want to offer. Is I think the whole loop around what people really want. I'm going to stop screen sharing. The whole loop of what we really want as a team is there's so many people involved in building these AI pipelines. There's your PMs, there's your customers, there's your ML engineers, there's your prompt engineers, there's your software engineers. We really want the code to be the source of truth. And we want your PM to say, hey, that classification function you wrote, it didn't pick the right category because all the categories I see in the UI are wrong, are missing this one category that users are saying. And we want those categories of the PMCs to be exactly the ones you have in your code. So then
Got
when the
it.
PM says this is failing, they send you the link to that event. And you as an
Right.
engineer just download, make it a test case, check it in, and iterate.
Right. So your observability is very closely tied to the specific areas in the code, which is your BAML code. And it tells you
Exactly.
exactly that, okay, this is where we need to look at. This is the test case you need to look at. So it's like a one-to-one mapping. It's not something
Yeah.
in midair, which is already like a big difference from a lot of observability tools out there. What about the more traditional observability? Like if you're doing an agent, there are multiple calls being made and you might want to see the trace of what's going wrong, what's working. What
So
about those things?
what I showed you is actually only like one view, but there's
Got it.
another
Just
view
one
that gives
part of
you a
it.
trace view
Got it.
that actually lets you actually go see like this agent called these things. It's still calling these things, and you can actually get a
Oh, it's
real-time
live.
view along with a completed view.
And is this extensible in the sense that if I'm using something like LangGraph, can I add my own spans? Okay, shouldn't use open
Yes,
telemetry words, but
yes.
so you can extend, you can add your own spans to the
You
same
can add
request.
non-BAML spans into it.
Is it open telemetry compatible or is it like a
No,
custom
it's not.
protocol? It's custom.
And the reason
Okay.
it's not OpenTelemetry compatible is have you ever looked at OpenTelemetry data blobs?
Yeah,
They're not designed to be good. Like,
that is true.
holy freaking cow! I don't know how people are using them. Like, let me rephrase. They're really good for certain things. If you want strongly structured observability, and I think it goes back to structure. If you want type safe observability, you need something better than OpenTelemetry. It just doesn't offer the type safety that you want.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's true. I think we had Samuel from Pydantic a couple of weeks back, and he did mention that Open Telemetry is coming up with a new spec. But again, it's very restricted and it won't cover the types you want in your applications. It just
exactly.
has the standard types which people think LLM should have. But what about your types? It just
And
forgets
what
about
about like
those.
recursive types and all these
What about
weird
recursive
systems?
types? Oh
And
yeah,
like,
recursive types. I didn't think of that.
yeah, exactly. Right. And like, there's weird things that people want to do. And code that is beautiful and systems that are beautiful are things that can express everything really nicely. And that's why TypeScript is amazing. You
Yep.
can write any type and it just works. Like, holy cow, it just works in every world that you want. And what does an observability system look like if it has autocomplete? If it has versioning of data models without you having to use protobuf, right?
Ah.
There's small things like that that I think they're sleeping on basically. Is like if you use OpenTelemetry, you can never do that.
Yeah. Oh, this is a very interesting point. So somebody had a question about versioning BAML. So yeah, you can version BAML in just Git because it's just
BAML,
files. But we're talking about versioning on the observability layer itself.
we do
So
it for you by default. The
that is
compiler is versioning your BAML code, and then when you version it, we version the observability without you writing a line of code.
so am I envisioning a world where my observability system would be aware of my A/B test going on because it can see different versions?
Literally, yes. You'll be able to do I didn't show this in the screenshot. I think there's a view in there where you can actually split a function by its many versions.
Ah,
So if
interesting.
you
Okay.
change your data model, and let's say your data model depends on a different data model.
Okay.
And like let's say data model A depends on data model B, and your function returns data model A. But now you change data model B. Your observability will automatically split for you without you writing a single line of code.
That is clean.
Yeah.
I mean, you said you have a proprietary, okay, proprietary might not be the right word, but a custom protocol at this point. But if it's a custom protocol, I think folks will definitely ask this question. Is it something they can host themselves? Is
Well,
this open
BAML is
source?
open source. You will always be able to use BAML. You will be able to see our protocol going over the wire. The code is there. You can do
Uh-huh.
whatever you want with it.
Okay.
I don't know if we've yet committed to making all of Boundary's code fully open source.
Like
I
the
think we have some
back end
really
of the
novel.
observability platform, you mean?
Yeah, we'll make it
Okay.
VPC compatible, so you can deploy it one click on any remote cloud.
Okay.
I come from a hedge fund background. I know how secure systems are, and certain systems have to be completely air gapped. So we will support that kind of use case. But I
Okay.
don't know if we as a company have decided that we want to make everything 100% fully open source yet. We want to be as
Fair
open source
enough.
as possible.
Fair enough.
But like we don't want to accidentally pull a Docker
Right.
with Amazon, and Amazon is suddenly like, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
we now make all the money on Docker. We make all the money on
Yeah.
Elastic.
Absolutely. No,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of
but we're not
sense.
against being open source either. So we're still evaluating that. But open source is a very one-way door. So that's why BAML will always be open source.
Got
Everything
it.
you run on the runtime
Got it.
will be 100% open source always.
Got it. Absolutely.
The
That
playground open source. Like that, none of this stuff will ever change.
got it. So let's flip it the other way around then. So if people want to be like, okay, you know what? I don't want to use boundary ML for whatever reason, as in on the backend for observability. They still would be interested in the various logs coming out. They might not get the advanced features which you guys offer, but they might want to
Yeah.
log those events out and store them in. So from that perspective, would BAML allow it, or it's going to be tightly coupled
We
with?
have a thing that's going to go out in next Monday's release that'll allow you to
Okay,
capture every HTTP request and input output that BAML makes.
perfect. Oh,
So then
okay.
you can plug that into like LangFuse or LangSmith or
Whatever
whatever
people want to
observability
use.
platform we don't care.
That's
Like
good.
we're going to be really, really agnostic to that.
Got it. And this would extend to the suspension events and things like that once we get into that as well, right? Like,
Well,
can I
I mean,
add
that's going to be
custom
part of the
logs?
BAML. That's part of the BAML protocol.
Okay.
So that
All
won't
right.
really, BAML will do things there. It's kind of how
Right.
I put it. And like
So,
you will have all the state available to yourself to resume, return whatever you want.
right. How about this? Will BAML allow me to add log statements which gets spit out by the consumption layer? Because
I
once you're
don't know yet.
putting into loops, you might want to add some debugging statements and things like that, right?
Yeah, I don't really know how that's going to play out yet. We have to go
All
think
right.
about that. Like, what does
Fair
it
enough.
mean for us? Like, what is the API contract we want to make with every language? Right now,
Right.
I think the beauty of BAML is when you call it in a different function, you get the data type out. You don't think about it. There's no like choices object. You have to iterate over and do choices bracket 0.content. You just get your schema out. You don't have to worry about like removing data. You just get the data you specified, and that makes certain things harder, like getting token usage, etc.
Right.
But it makes 90 percentile of the work way easier. 90% of your code is cleaner.
Right. Got it. My last question, or last train of questions. Oh my God. Thank you so much for your time, by the way. I really
Yeah, this is
appreciate it.
fun.
Is BAML with the client registry and the way the client system works in BAML in general? And I think somebody had the question, so I just want to expand on that a little bit. It seems like BAML is taking care of a lot of things which something like a model gateway would take care of, something like a light LLM, in the sense that you have a lot of fallback logic baked into the BAML syntax. So there's a lot of overlap with the model gateway here, but it's also kind of restrictive in some ways. I have two specific examples here. So the first one is, what if you have like you want to integrate like a custom protocol? It's very hard to do that because a lot of your calling is directly in the Rust layer, if I understand that right.
Yes.
Or let's say you want to do some more advanced routing logic, like based on the customer's subscription or based on their role, you might want to use a different, model altogether.
Yes.
It starts getting ugly when we
I
get into
agree.
that region. So
I
what are your
agree.
thoughts on that?
I think a lot of these problems get solved once we offer the expression language.
I think you're right.
Because then you can just write the expression language right in BAML, and you can make a client that is a function that says, given this state, it will then decide what client to return. And then we resolve the prompt and everything on there. I think a lot of those problems get solved pretty easily with
Right.
that. So we might do a shorthand for the expression language a little bit faster because we see that call pattern emerge a little bit more.
Right.
Just a little bit. Like people want to call different models more often.
Yeah. So what I understand is right now in the function, your client is like hard coded right at the top. That's going to be a part of an expression as well. So you can change that dynamically.
Like
Got it.
just like
Okay.
dynamic types, where you can
Got
like
it.
pass in types dynamically. You can imagine that you should be able to write code that expresses the client that you want.
Got it. Okay.
So that's kind of the dream of BAML. I mean, I think BAML started as a totally dumb idea that me and Aaron had one day, like one night, in the midst of like being like just staring at all these LLM SDKs and being like, this can't be the answer. This literally cannot be the answer. And it's really cool to be having these conversations now where we're talking about like, oh,
Very
like you're
niche use
literally
cases.
asking, how do I do more in BAML?
Yep.
And I can't express to you how much that means to me. And not just me, the whole team. It's like it's incredible for us to have like now an hour plus conversation about like features that BAML could add that are way more complex than
Yep.
anything we could have imagined when we started out.
That's true. It's incredible. I mean, that's literally been my stream of questions. And Vaibhav, you've been absolutely great. You've been very transparent. I really appreciate that. I bet everybody in chat appreciates that as well. Chat, give us a W if you think this was worth it, okay? Give us an L if it wasn't. But would really, really love your feedback. Now, Vaibhav, why we get a lot of W's, because I know we're getting W's in the chat for this one. Something off your chest, maybe something you want to plug in, something you want to add?
No, honestly, what I want is like, tell me the things that everyone hates about BAML. That's the part that's going to help us all love BAML more next year.
Yep.
Like 2024 was like the year when we built out a little bit of it. We really want 2025 to have shipped BAML 1.0 and make a lot of these things that we're talking about in theory, like expression language, suspend, all these things, we want to make them much better and way more extensible for everyone else. So like the only way we can do that is if people write more code in BAML. They try to write code in BAML and they tell us like, I can't do this, what the heck? And they just express their desires, because while I said that people won't ask for a car, it turns out once people saw a car, they started asking for a lot of features in that car that led to like the vehicles that we have today. And it's the same thing here. It's like, we probably can't imagine everything BAML needs to do.
Absolutely.
And we really trust everyone. I think one of the coolest things about our community is a little bit more advanced developers than a lot of other communities. Like I see the conversations I have, but people, I can talk about like the GIL in Python. I can talk about coroutines in Go and nuances there. And I can learn from people in ways that like about things I don't even know.
Yep.
And our community does a lot of debugging too, which is wild because it's a weird Rust code base and they find issues. They're like, this line is a problem. And it means that everyone here has the ability to give suggestions that are super, super warranted and are really going to help make BAML better.
Absolutely.
So please share away. Tell us everything you hate about it.
Absolutely. I mean, BAML, in my experience, it's a very straightforward tool on the surface, but once you dive deep into it, there's a lot of stuff happening there. And the fact that you're kind of recreating or maybe performing a paradigm shift in the LLM space, I truly think that's true. I mean, that's huge contribution from your ends to the community, and I really appreciate it. And definitely people on my server, and of course people on your server, they're definitely going to be cognizant of that and going to help you to make this even better. Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for coming on this stream.
One last thing. I know you said it was me that did it. Remember, it's a team.
It's the team, of course. Aaron, Sam,
we have
everybody.
Michael Reg, Antonio, Chris, Michael, everyone on there.
All of them. Absolutely. You're just the face who gets the credit more often.
And I really shouldn't. We should really be getting more folks down here that aren't me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vaibhav. If people have more questions, because I know I missed a lot of it, which has been on the chat, where can they reach out to you?
The Discord is the best way. We respond really freaking fast. But if you really hate Discord, message me on LinkedIn or drop me an email at bbv@boundaryml.com.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. All right, then. Thanks for coming on the stream, Vaibhav. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. So, guys, this has been amazing. This was such a crazy-ass conversation. I can't believe how deep we got on a lot of things. Do join BAML's Discord. Yeah, the entire team here. And of course, you can join my Discord as well. We talk all about BAML. We talk about other things. We compare stuff. We get deep into the weeds. You know what this channel is about. You know what the community is about. Make sure you join those. And I'll see you soon. And yes, Curious Monkey, we did not talk about Nope, but maybe next time. That's going to be our little secret for now. We talk about the agentic framework of our dreams later on. But thanks, guys, for joining in. I really appreciate it. Your questions, like always, has been amazing. Thank you so, guys. I'll see you then.